If you need a Bible, slip up your hand. We would love to get a Bible in your hand and turn to Hebrews 12. Hebrews 12. The series that we've been going through is By Faith. And if you need a note sheet, you can slip up your hand for the note sheet as well to see those announcements as well as where we are going. And I decided last minute to kind of switch it up. On here it says pressure, promise, practicals. We are going to reverse the last two, and so it's going to be pressure, practicals, and the promise. And I'm going to talk about what those things are. So just so you know, you can go ahead and reverse it on your sheet, point 2 and point 3, about the promise and the practicals. Hebrews 12, verse 1. We have been hearing about these amazing people in the Old Testament filled with faith. And now the audience is shifting. Who we are talking about is now moving. And not only the people, but also the time period in which we are looking is also changing. We have looked back in the past, and now we are going to move to the present. We've looked back at these people of old, and now we're looking at the audience themselves, and I would even say us here this morning. So let's look at how we as people are part of this move of faith. Hebrews 12, verse 1. Therefore, because we have seen all of these people, since we are surrounded by these great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely or easily entangles, meaning that it is sin that is not just on the outside, but it is entangled us in our heart, soul, mind, and strength. It has gripped us in every way. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Reading this verse, you can only think there is so much pressure on this audience. There's so much pressure on us. There's pressure from the audience of old watching in on us. There's pressure from the audience outside those of the Christian faith who are saying, do you really believe that you are a part of this great story? There's pressure from the author himself saying, hey, guess what? You are now taking this race forward. It's kind of like a faith relay race. And guess what? The baton has been passed to you from all of these faithful people. Now it's your turn. The author has put pressure on this audience that's reading this as well as ourselves. And then if you look at the specifics, there is pressure with performance. You see all sorts of layers of pressure upon the audience. They have now lived in a place where, yes, we heard these old stories, and yes, Jesus did live, but now what do? I guess we just go back to the way things were. And the mantra on their hearts, this current audience, is this is just the way life is. We are going back into the cyclical motion. Well, that was fun for a time, but this is just the way life is. And other people are looking in on them and saying, do you really believe your life can change? And they're like, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't be running in this kind of race. Maybe we should back up a second and just say, you know what? Maybe things can't change. Maybe things can't be different. And then they feel the pressure of the cyclical fashion that this is just the way life is. This is just the way life is. And so they are dealing with pressure not only from the outside, but from within. There is so much pressure. I want to give an example of this kind of pressure with an actual relay race. I mean, have you seen a relay race recently? If you look at the Olympics, you're like, oh my goodness. Okay, the runner has to time themselves with the runner behind them, look at them, take the baton, then they've got to run, and then they've got this audience just cheering them on. They got people all around them who are running right alongside them. They got to beat them, and so like, oh my goodness, I got to go. There's the exit. Also, I've got to run in a certain way. I've got to make sure I stay in my lane. I've got to make sure I finish well. There is so much pressure in a relay race itself. I mean, feel this kind of pressure by watching this relay race from 2017.
Saved away. Sejan looks as though he's got a good start and has already taken some ground out of China and is going away from France. Jamaica had a good start, so the USA, but Great Britain are leading it. Jamili's got the back, and on the outside, Japan are having a good run. Jamili's running brilliantly down the back straight. He'll give it to Danny Talbot. Great Britain still leading this, it's safe. And now, Johan Blake has got the back, but it's Britain out in front. He's going to be chased by the great man, Mitchell Blake. He's going to get it, and away he goes. The USA got Coleman chasing, and Usain Bolt is coming. Coleman's coming back. Mitchell Blake trying to hang on. It's going to be tight. It's going to be goal! A new British record.
I mean, I don't know if it was the music or what, but like my heart is pounding whenever I watch that video. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening. Even though I already know the result, I start freaking out because if you look around them and what they're going through and what they're thinking. I mean, you got Usain Bolt running right next to you, and you're like, I've got to win this thing, but I always know he's going to win. And then he cramps up, and you're like, oh, and then it starts entering into their head, oh my goodness, Usain Bolt just cramped up. Maybe I can win this. Okay, wait a minute. I got to focus. I got to run forward. And there's millions of people watching this team run. I mean, imagine the pressure. And that was just a relay race that lasted a couple minutes. We are in a faith relay race that lasts a lifetime. I mean, the pressure that we feel. I showed you a picture of Judah, and as we found out that we were pregnant with him, we started feeling some pressure. We actually went to the doctor in the very beginning, and we went there, and they said, you're not pregnant. Go home. So we went home, and we're like, okay, something's still not right. Take tests, still saying that we're pregnant. We go back, and then they say, okay, you are pregnant. Then we go run some tests, and we find out that my wife has a 2-vessel umbilical cord. You're supposed to have 3. We only had 2, which means he's not going to get the nutrients that he needs to actually grow properly. So they thought he's going to be coming early. He's going to be born underweight. We move forward, and she has too much amniotic fluid. So now we find out what's not developing is probably his digestive system because there's too much fluid. And so they're trying to figure out what's going on with his digestive system. Why is he not processing these things correctly? Why is there too much amniotic fluid? And then we start getting fearful because they had said, you'll be under the due date, but then the due date comes, nothing's happened. And then we can't get scheduled for delivery, and so we have to push it further back, which then increases stillbirth. And like, hey, guess what? If you go past 7 days, it'll increase stillbirth. Okay, we're on day 10, and like we're going to the hospital, and we're like freaking out at this moment. So we go to the hospital. My wife is a champ. She delivers Judah, and then when Judah is born, our doctor's face turns pale. My wife had hemorrhaged, but the issue was the doctor couldn't figure out where the blood was coming from. And there's panic on her face, and she says, I need these 2 doctors, I need these nurses, we need everyone in here right now. They looked at my wife, Megan, and they said, guess what? I'm so sorry. We can't give you medicine for this. We've got to have surgery right here, right now. Because we don't know what's going on. We haven't figured it out. We don't know what's happening. So we had surgery on the spot. My wife had lost a lot of blood, so she couldn't move. We were in the hospital a lot longer than we thought we would be. And then 40 hours after he was born, our son wasn't reacting to hardly anything. About 4 a.m, I pick him up, and he lays limp in my hands. And so I was like, okay, maybe I'm overreacting here, first time dad, hey nurse, I think I'm overreacting here. It's probably not a big deal, but like he's not moving, very well. And she looks at me and she says, we need to take him to the NICU right now. And so I go down to the NICU with him, and as I'm seeing him be held, they prick his foot and he has no response. They have to get a blood culture, they have to get tons of blood from him, and they prick him in the foot, no response. And through the whole course, I was thinking, this is so much pressure. And now, guess what? As the husband, I have to go back to my wife and talk about what just happened with like a straight face. And not only that, but like a hopeful face. And with all of the pressure from all of these moments, I thought to Jesus, this is a race I can't run. I cannot run in this kind of race. You want me to be this happy, cheery person when my son is laying limp and go to my wife and say, guess what, honey? It's gonna be okay. I can't run that kind of race. I can't do it. That is too much pressure. And for some of you in the room, you have even worse stories than that. Maybe with your kids, maybe with other kind of birth stories, maybe with your job, maybe with your family, maybe with your future. You are dealing with so much pressure. And maybe on the outside you're saying, yeah, I can run this race. I can run with endurance. I can cast this stuff off. I've got this. But deep down you're thinking, this is a race I cannot run. If it helps you, it helps me. On your notes, under the pressure section, not only talking about those different kinds of pressure, but if you just want to, you don't have to share it with anybody, just you and the Lord. If you are dealing with a certain kind of pressure right now, I'd love for you to write it down, because then we're going to look at what do we do in those situations and how do we do it. So what do we do with this pressure that we are identifying? What do we do with the pressure that we've dealt with, or the situation that we're in now, or we know something's coming in the future that it's going to be a pressure-filled moment? What do we do? Well, we move into some practical things that the author here has given us in verse 1. I want you to write these down. There's 4 things. The first thing is continuing with the same rhythm. You think about it with a relay race, you've got all of these faithful people of old running at a certain pace, and if we're in a faith relay race, we've got to start running at the same pace with them to get the baton and then continue running. We have to have the same rhythm. And if you know our series, it's called By Faith. And so these people of old, they're running with the mantra that says, by faith you can do this, by faith you can do this, by faith you can do this. So we have to have that mantra, by faith I can do this, by faith I can do this. The second thing, throw off weight. I love that the author separates weight from sin. We always focus on the sin piece. It's like, okay, how can I stop sinning? It's so funny dealing with students. That question comes up time and time again. You'll have a guy come up to us and he'll say, hey, Benton, yeah, if I hang out with my girlfriend at 9 in our basement by ourselves, and we're alone and parents aren't home, is that sin? And I'm like, okay, you're asking if it's sin or not? And I started realizing, if I said, okay, hey, if it wasn't sin, would you go do it? Is that what it is for you? Is that the question we ask? What the author is showing us is say, hey, we don't just ask questions on, hey, is this sin or not? We also got to look at what things are even weights on us or not. Because there's things, good things, that are distracting us where we are trying so hard to relieve the pressure. When the pressure gets tough, sometimes we just want to put on a different weight and say, you know what, I'm going to watch TV for a while. Or I'm going to go hang out with these people. I don't want to deal with the pressure right now in my job or in my family. I'm going to go check out and go do something completely different to where I become numb, honestly, to where I run back into the pressure-filled moments and I don't run with endurance. We cannot just ask the question, how do I not sin? We also have to think about, how do I take off certain weights that don't help me run well? The right question for us this morning is, how do we not sin? How do we run away from weights? But how do we run well? So the four things are running with the same rhythm, throwing off weights, throwing off sins that entangle, that grip us. And then the last piece is running with endurance. You look at those 4 action steps and you're like, wait a minute, I've got pressure from audiences, I got pressure from myself, I got pressure going on within me, I got thoughts in my head, I've got this kind of pressure, and what you're telling me to do is to do these 4 things, and then that answers the pressure. I can't even move forward because the pressure is so heavy upon me from every angle, and you're telling me to go do these things? If we were just to read Hebrews 12:1 and leave, we would probably feel hopeless. We would probably be like, I can't run this race, and you're telling me to go run this race even harder. And so how? The question is how? And that's point number 3, is we have to bank on the promises that come from God. What are those promises? This is where I want to camp out for the rest of our time this morning. Hebrews 12, verse 2. Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy was set before him and endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. I mean, look at this. I love how the author did this. We're talking about the people of old. Now we're talking about us. And then we read verse 2, and it's like, wait, where did we go? How are we supposed to do this? How are we supposed to do this, author? You're only talking about Jesus all of a sudden. Where are we in this? How are we supposed to do this? This is a race I can't run. How am I supposed to do this? He said, that's the exact point. Verse number 1 is supposed to leave us with the question of, how do we run this race? Or even believing this is a race I can't run. And how we do it is we step into these promises. And the promises are, we look to Jesus, who is the author, or like we've talked about over the summer, the pioneer, the founder of faith. That he is the one in our faith journey. Let's just say that this is our faith journey timeline here. We have the people of old, we have us, and what is being said here is, guess what? Jesus has pioneered the trail where he's gone before us, and he stands back and looks at us and says, I have traveled down this road of pressure that you feel. You can have hope and bank on that promise. But not only that, he's saying, I'm the author. So I've been here in the beginning, and I wrote out this course that's been set before you. I'm the founder, meaning I've laid down this foundation of faith for you. He's the pioneer of our timeline of faith. But not only is he the pioneer, but it says this, he is the perfecter of our faith. That is amazing promise. He's the perfecter of our faith. What do you mean? I thought it was supposed to be like the perfecter of his faith. He perfected his faith, right? Because if you read here, yeah, he went on a journey, he died on a cross, and now he's with God again. But you're saying perfecter of our faith. What does this mean? What is this? How do we do this? How does this apply to us? Where are we in this verse? Let's look at this from a bigger picture. I actually have a graphic for us to look at on the breakdown of Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. That we are surrounded by a fellowship of witnesses, that we're supposed to cast off sin and shame, that we're supposed to endure the race. Tons of pressure there. Tons of stuff to work on. Tons of stuff coming from the outside world. And then there's Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter, the hinge point of these two verses. Because I'm supposed to run with endurance, he endured. I'm supposed to cast off sin and shame, he despised shame. He didn't even look at it, he hated it. I have surrounded by a fellowship of witnesses. At the end of it all, he gets his joy and prize, and that is being with his Father. And this is our faith relay race. What the author is saying here is that Jesus is at the center of our faith. That he, despising shame, took on the cross, the most shameful experience. That he endured. And that he got to be with God. He was faithful in his race. Not only that, but he was faithful in ours. You've heard this line over and over. When we were faithless, he was still faithful. But what we see with him being the perfecter is he's not only in the beginning, he's not only in the end, he's not only laying down a foundation, but he is moving with us in our faith journey. And so the mantra from the people of old is not, by faith you can do this, by faith you can do this. The truth, the real promise is that it is by his faith we can do this. With all the pressure, with all the things that have happened in my life, with all the people that have harmed me, with all the people that victimized me, he became a victim for me by being faithful, and it's his faith that we can hold on to, and we say, by his faith, we can do this. We can get through the pressure. We can get through the heartache. We can get through the hopelessness. We can do this because it is by his faith, not ours. I love this example that I've heard before about how this works, that it's from faith to faith. It's from his faith that impacts our faith. Like when we go to a doctor and get a checkup on our reflexes and we get hit in the knee and then our knee-jerk reaction is to kick up. You know, it's funny, when I was in high school, there was this high school student on the bus who would run down the aisle of the bus, and he would just hit people's knees. And legs would just start flying up, hitting the backs of the seats, going everywhere, hitting the person next to him. I mean, it was incredible, okay? When I was sitting on the bus, I said, this guy's going places, all right? He's got his life together. He is going somewhere big, probably magic show, whatever, I don't know, but he's got it together. But when it comes to God's faith, it is like his faith comes down into our hearts and we respond with faith. It's like the knee-jerk reaction of our hearts is to respond with faith. My hope for us in the room this morning, wherever you're at, whatever pressure you are feeling, whatever practical things you're trying to do, that you would hold on to this promise that God is faithful to you. And that God is with you. God is in this faith relay race carrying you through. God is coming to you saying, I'm here for you. I'm faithful to you. I want to be with you. And guess what? I'm not just some guy waving a checkered flag saying, hey, come on, buddy, you can do this. I'm not just some like soccer mom on the sideline saying, hey, I got snacks when you're done. He's saying, no, you feel faithless. I'm going to pick you up and we are going to walk together into a life of faithfulness. Because he's saying, guess what? I'm not just going to be in front of you. I'm not just going to be behind you. But guess what? My faith will carry you through. And so you don't have to be a victim to the pressure. Because I became a victim in your place. And now my faith comes to you. My grace comes to you. And I will never leave you. I love this about our Father, is that he doesn't just take us from a place of pressure-filled moments and then just says, hey, I'm just going to fix it in an instant. But he says, I'm going to do something with this. I'm going to create within you true joy, true happiness from pressure. And guess what? I'm not only going to be here at the end saying, hey, I'm just going to go fix it for you. I'm just going to go fix it for you. But he's saying, I want to help you be found in who you really are. And in a race where you say, this is a race I can't run, you're right. But it's a race that he has already run. It's a race that he is running with you. And we get to declare as believers in him, wait a minute, by his faith, we can do this. Yes, it's hard now. Yes, it will be hard in the future, but it is by his faith that we can do this. And at the end, not only Jesus gets joy that's set before him, but we get joy as well when we get to be at the very end in relationship with our Creator once again, in its fullness. See, the point of the author is he's saying, hey, I'm not here to just medicate sin. I'm not here to just fix the symptom of sin. Oh, and guess what? The most evil thing in the world isn't sin. It's a broken relationship with our Creator. And guess what? It will be fixed. And guess what? He's with you now in that relationship to where it no longer has to be broken. But we can move in that fellowship with our Heavenly Father. That we can experience some joy now, and we get to experience some joy later because of his faithfulness to do what he was called to do, but also being faithful to us. One way I want to respond this morning is taking communion. So band, you can come on up. We're going to pass out some trays, and I want to talk about communion with you. And then we're going to worship. The bread, his body, and the juice, his blood, is a symbol of his faithfulness towards us. That his body was broken. His blood was poured out. You know, scholars say that this was the most shameful experience you can have because you can never redeem your honor once you've been crucified and die. We know the end of the story doesn't end that way for him, but this is a shameful moment that he has taken on. Not only in that moment, but he's taken on our shame as well. And we look at these things. We look at the elements. And we take of them as to say, we want to receive your faithfulness towards us once again. We want to realize, we want to become aware of how faithful you are to us. And as we take it, we move in hope and have the reflex of moving in faith as well. And the beauty of actually taking these things is that we're not just taking them and then we leave, but we are also realizing that Christ is in us. Christ is in us. On our faith journey, it is Christ in us, not Christ instead of us. Meaning, we don't just stand on a sideline and think, oh, it's just going to be another pressure-packed moment. But we consume who Christ is and say, guess what? No longer do we have to live with the lie or the mantra that this is just the way life is. Here comes more pressure. This is just the way life is. No, we can say, guess what? Miracles can happen now. And they can happen in our midst. We don't have to just sit on the sidelines, but we can experience and we can marvel at the things that God can do in us and through us. We have purpose. We have belonging. We have a future. And we can experience miracles through the pressure moments because Christ is in us, the hope of glory. And so I'm going to pray for us, and then we'll take the elements. Jesus, we give you this time. We say that you are the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. And it is by your faith that we can live. It is by your faith that we can move. It is by your faith that we can have purpose. And so we take of your body that was broken for us and your blood that was poured out for us. We take of it to say, we receive. The way that we can do life, the way that we can run a race, is we first have to look to you and receive the promises that you have for us. And then from here, Lord, I pray that we would be moved by your Spirit, entering into the pressure-packed moments with faith. Because it's by your faith that we can do this. It's by your faith that we can live for your glory and for our good. It's your name we pray. Amen.